Hi guys, we're back. We've been sick for a while, but now we are back and we're alive. Tom had his injury, I had the worst cold of my life, but we are back on track. So you might be wondering what's going on and what is the podcast. Tom, tell us about the podcast.
What is even? How to even computer?
Yeah.
So we had this. We had a couple of conversations about producing content, and we want to get better at making content. And in order to get better at it, you got to do it more frequently. In order to do it more frequently, you have to kind of lower the expectations of what you're going to produce, so that you can do it without stressing out and having a lot of anxiety and all that stuff. So Alex proposed that we do like a semi-weekly type of podcast thing, and I think that's we're going to try it. We're going to see how it works. We're going to see if people enjoy it, see if people watch or listen, or however this is going to shake out. And we're going to talk about a bunch of different kinds of things during these short little conversations, which I'll hand that off to Alex to tell you about.
Well, the thing that bugged me is that we would be working and recording these tutorials on asset production. Tom would be designing and coding some components for a game, but it would be an isolated work that we do in our spare time, and in the end you guys would see the final content and you would see the tutorials, but you would not see or hear the discussion that went into this whole process where we decide the reason we're designing components a certain way or modeling assets in a certain style. And in a video game development world, it's not about what software you're going to use to texture your environments or how many polygons you're going to have on your character. The toughest and the hardest part is always the decision-making process in the stage in the design stage that usually happens behind the scenes. You can go on YouTube and find hundreds of thousands of tutorials that cover the software aspect and modeling and the art aspect of the game design process. But you will never find something like what we're doing here, where we discuss the design challenges of creating a particular game.
Yeah, or even something as simple as just how to sustain your motivation, how to get you've been working all day, and how do you flip that around so that you have the creative energy to continue working after hours and keep that going.
So we are hoping that this podcast will give you a little bit more context to why we are doing things a certain way, and it will also help us to stay on track and keep the momentum going and keep working on our game projects.
Yeah, I think that's enough about the podcast.
Okay, so what's our next thing that we wanted to talk about?
Bandit. What is it?
Bandit. Okay, so Bandit, or the Trash Raccoon Bandit,
or Sneaky Feet. I still like Sneaky Feet.
I don't know, man. I like
it's
Bandit.
It's cute.
Trash,
it's friendly.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So, as you can tell, we are really bad at naming things.
I'm fantastic at naming things. You suck at it.
Hey,
I'm going to maintain that.
Trash Bandit Raccoon. It sounds like Metal Gear Solid. It's awesome.
It sounds nothing like Metal Gear Solid.
Okay. So, you guys probably already know, if you've been following the Patreon, that I've been working on this cartoony raccoon character. That for me it was very very much a design exercise, and I wanted I'm a sci-fi guy, so I wanted to step away from it and design something nice and cheerful and friendly. So as I was working on it, Tom and I started coming up with a backstory, and it ended up resulting in a pretty interesting game idea. So the Bandit is a Mario N64 style platformer, where you run around as this lovely raccoon and you collect trash, and you avoid obstacles, and you avoid being captured.
Yeah, and I think just really quickly to just take one step back and talk about the motivation for why we're doing this particular project. We have hundreds of tutorial hours planned for things in Gamedev the Pipeline, but one of the things that we were missing was the idea that there is a start-to-finish process for creating interactive media, a video game. You can record, Alex UV unwrapping a model 600 times, and yeah, there's always going to be some little nuance that's different about every particular model, and seeing that has a lot of value, but also it's really valuable to see something like, okay, we're going to create this character, and then we're going to add behaviors to that character, and we're going to put them in a scene that's been constructed, an environment that provides a very simple game loop, and we're going to talk about all of the other things. It's going to expose many, many more hours worth of content for us to create. And at the end of all that, we get a game, which is really super cool.
And you guys get to play that game and play test it in the process. So yeah, both of us very much have a game designer mindsets, and being able to interact with our work and having the work we do, having it being a part of a bigger project, to us it's just much more interesting, something that's much more interesting to work on.
Yeah, I think the majority of the work that we've been doing lately, I mean, it's all like contract stuff where it's like, I just need this one piece built, and you don't get to do any of the other cool stuff. It's just this one little box of stuff, and that's it. So this will be nice. It'll be nice to be able to work on something that's got a broader scope.
Yeah. So how do you start something like a video game?
Starting is really hard. Starting is hard. Yeah, there's nothing more terrifying than a blank canvas in Photoshop.
Working on something is easy. Starting and ending something is like the unachievable tasks. Usually when you come up with a game idea, it starts out as a conversation, and it can be a conversation with yourself where you're alone in a dark room talking to yourself about the game idea. Yeah. Or you can talk, or be like me and talk to the other guy who is in the dark room talking to himself, like Tom. And early on, you want to start this conversation, but as soon as you spend good half an hour talking about something, you really want to step away from move from talking to writing down the idea. Putting the idea on paper is essential, because the things that aren't on paper, they do not exist in the real world. And the moment you bring this idea into the real world, you can collaborate with other people, and you can go more into detail describing a certain mechanics. I worked with a programmer on a project for 3 months, and on a daily basis we would talk about a certain mechanic that we wanted to implement every day. And by the time we got to implementing it, we realized that we've been talking about two completely different things. And what's the moral of the story? Write the thing down and continue discussion on paper.
Yeah, I came up with a list of sort of justifying reasons for using this process, and there's a really strong analogy between sketching versus painting, or planning versus doing. I think everybody can kind of agree, like, yeah, okay, coming up with a conceptual, some sort of representative concept of the whole thing before you start is usually a good idea, or at least enough detail to get you started. But one of the things that it does that I find really helpful is it actually lowers the barrier to entry to the entire process. Like, we're not really starting to make the game yet. We're just doing the design doc first. We're just going to write up what the gameplay is, what the mechanics are, what kind of content is going to be in the game, that sort of thing. Very low risk. Anyone can do this stage of the process. Talk about the game using words on paper or on a screen, as the case may be. Another thing that it's really helpful for is, when you start, if you open up Unreal Engine and you start working, it can be difficult to try to figure out like what's next, and there can be some anxiety while you're building something. Like, once I finish this, I'm not really sure what to do after that, and I'm hoping that inspiration's going to strike when I get done with this thing. But if it doesn't, what am I going to do? I'm going to go, F5 Twitter for 2 hours. So knowing what comes next is actually a pretty helpful thing. And go ahead.
People approach the planning in 2 different ways. Some people are pro planning and they will spend hours or sometimes even days and weeks planning every single tiny step ahead. And there is danger to this method, because you can lock yourself into this pre-planned scenario, and then by the time you get to implementing mechanics, and you would realize that in real world, like, the game doesn't feel as good as you thought it would. But because you already spent all this time planning, you just stick to your plan and hope that it's going to resolve itself at the end, which is not a very good way to approach games. Games is an interactive medium. It's not like even a software a lot of times is, even though you interact with the software, the feel doesn't really matter as much, or the sense of feedback that you get from the software. When with game, it's crucial that your jump feels right, that your locomotion feels like makes you feeling immersed into the level, right? So it's important to be flexible with the work you do, and refer to your plan, but always be able to take a step to the side and look at the work that you've done and change the plan. On the opposite hand, there are people who like to just jump into the engine and start adding features and then expanding like on things, and like, oh, this is cool, I'm gonna add this, I'm gonna add bullet time, slow motion fighting, because it's awesome. But
this reactionary or like emergent development, which is totally cool, it's totally valid. It's
yeah, but a lot of times the game design is not about the features that you have in your game, but the features that you take out of it. And
sure,
you won't be able to see the full scope of what you're creating.
So the way that I kind of see it is, you're basically just creating fertile ground to put your seeds into to grow really strong plants. And each one of those vertical, tomato plants is meant to represent that sort of emergent or reactionary development, where you're fine-tuning behaviors and you're maybe exploring new branches of gameplay mechanics in process, but you're always sort of approaching it from a position of strength. You know what the whole's going to be, so you can focus more creative energy on just this one little tiny piece. And it usually produces better results.
I like your metaphor that you brought up earlier, where with the painting, where you do not start a painting without the underlying sketch, and it's important to draw out what you're gonna do before you start applying paint to the canvas.
Yeah, and listen, if you've got an endless budget for paint, by all means, dude, slather that stuff on there and sketch right on it. Mix all your colors right on the canvas. Do it all. Because that's a really enjoyable process. But we're doing this in our spare time, or worse, we're doing it on a constrained budget, which is even worse than doing it on your spare time. And I want to make sure that the time that I'm putting in is all going to lead to a successful outcome, or at least have a chance to lead to a successful outcome. And when you take that slapshot approach to development, it kind of even just look at it this way: you spend 25 hours researching bullet time visual effects, and then you get to the 75% mark of project completion, or where you think you might be 75%, and you look back and you realize, I'm not going to have bullets, so I'm going to lose all that time that I experimented on the bullet time effect or whatever. I don't know if that's a specific instance that we're talking about error.
No, I just.
And I'm not trying to make fun of anybody either. I think it is a very real thing. You gotta have some kind of a plan.
It really sucks spending like 20 hours on your time on something that you realize later that it's not gonna be implemented. But it's even worse when somebody else spends that time. And
there was something like you want it done, or something that's like so obvious from an outsider's perspective, like, dude, if we had just focused on behavior trees instead, if we'd spent all that time on behavior trees.
And do you realize that all that time could have been preserved if there was a little bit more of a clear communication? And design doc is what...
This is actually, I had never really thought about it this way before, but like, I am sure that there are people in our community or people that are going to see this, that they're going to hear this conversation, and they're going to remember that one team that they tried to be on, because everybody does that, right? You go out and you try to find a group of people to make a game with, you get involved, things seem like they're going really well, and then there's one dude on the team that just goes completely rogue and is like, I'm going to rewrite particle physics.
Yeah.
And like, dude, we need all this other stuff done. I need this other stuff. Like, I appreciate the creative intensity that you're going at this, like, making particles bounce off each other, but, dude. And that's ultimately, that's the kind of stuff that makes these teams fall apart and the game projects dissolve.
Yeah.
It's nothing, it's not a personal conflict, it's just, I gotta spend time on stuff that's gonna work out. I gotta stay positive.
On this note, we probably should show the design doc that we created for the Bandit.
I could put it up here. So yeah, this is I wouldn't expect anybody to read this over a stream or a recording or whatever, but we're actually going to be sharing this with our patrons. So if you're interested in following along or understanding more about the process that we go through, being able to see this, jump on over to Patreon and sign up for $1 a month access to be a patron. But you can see, from the outline here, it's not a very long document. I think it's 10 pages with spacing and images and stuff. It's probably only 6 or 7 pages long. And we're pretty liberal with the white space, so I think if you were to condense it down, it's probably, I don't know, is there a word count? It seems pertinent. Yeah, it's like 2,000 words. It's like a one really long blog post.
To clarify, the design doc is not something that we invented for our project. This is something that's been around for decades, and it's like depending on the project, the small indie game might only have a design doc that's only 5 pages long. I've seen design docs that were 50 pages long or 100 pages long, and they include everything from the marketing information, the distribution platforms of the game,
itemized list of materials and budgets for voice acting, and you could do that. You could do all that stuff if you need to. I mean, for us, really, because we're both artists. I mean, we come from that space, and there are certain things that you do, blocking out your major forms, and that's what we use the design document for, is to block out our major forms and get a sense for what the whole thing is. So, establishing what does losing the game look like, what does winning the game look like, and then the minor aspects of the game loop is defined by enemies and hazards, like just the biggest stuff. That's what we're really focused on. So that's the design doc.
And we are definitely going to be expanding on the design doc as we go, but just like I mentioned earlier, it's important to get the foundation down, and I personally like to expand on it as we go and be very flexible with it.
Yeah, and from that design document, we just use Trello. We've just got a really simple Trello set up. I'm showing that now, with interactive components, props, and assets, and then a list of the stuff that's done.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to build this once you've got the whole picture in mind.
Yeah. The interesting part is same thing as I was talking about in the beginning. You can see we went ahead and we described all our mechanics, but as we were writing things out and describing them in details, we found out that we have a slightly different idea for what losing would be, or what the different versions of winning. And you can see we have version 2 and version 1. And
yeah, like originally I had this idea that it would be like there's an RV that you take your trash back to, and it's this cute little 50s style RV, with a barbecue grill outside, and a couple of other things, some vinyl chairs and whatnot. And then Alex comes in and he's like, no, let's have this like giant trash pile that gets bigger and bigger and bigger as you play the game, which is actually a pretty cool concept. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually consolidating these two concepts, taking the pieces that we want to retain from both of them, and I'll merge them into a single win state.
It's fascinating how a simple Word document can be a tool for a conversation and for a dialogue between different team members.
Yeah, I think there's that tendency, and this actually came up during one of the conversations where we talked about this, because this is core to level design. Like I felt myself saying, boy, if there was just a shortcut, if there was just a way to just quickly jump over this problem and just already know the answer to this question. But it's important to resist that temptation, not for everything, obviously. I mean, everything in moderation, but it's important to resist that temptation, because that path leads to, what Jim Sterling calls the asset flip. Where you just go to the marketplace, you buy a bunch of crap, slap it together, and call it a story-based game or something.
Yeah.
Or you end up with a walking simulator.
On this note, let's move on and show some of the work that we've done already for the Bandit. And yeah.
You want me to show? I can show my the work that I've done on the pickup stores. So we know in the game we're going to have pickups, and so I knew that roughly what they were going to do, and since everything's going to be parameter driven, I can go ahead and build those pickups with just stand-in art. And so I built a couple of things. The first one I'm going to show is the coin pickups, which are tasty holes, basically Cheerios. And when you run over them, they contribute to your score. You can see up there at the top center, and they go away.
And if you collect 100 of them, you get a new life or something?
Yeah, that's the idea, but that's all parameter driven too. So, okay. So then in the bottom left corner, you can see I've only got one happy face. You get 3 happy faces per level. So per level tribe, when the level starts, you got three hearts basically, and when you get hurt or damaged, you lose one of those. And so we made the tuna can. Pick that up and you gain one. That works really well. There we go. Fold up. And what else? Yeah, I've got the mayonnaise jar over here. And if you look at this green spinny thing, when I collect the mayo jar, you can see it's not moving nearly as fast as it used to be.
Bullet time.
That's using time dilation to do that. So that works really well. And then, now it's back to normal. So, and then here's the already been chewed bubble gum, and when you pick that up, you get to double jump until you die. So that's
cool.
Double jump working. And then over here we got the soda can. You got to watch closely when this thing kicks in. It snaps the camera back, and you move it 3 times your normal speed. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And right now we're just using the built-in UE mannequin, but we're hoping to get proxy art here soon, right?
Yeah. That's true. One thing that I really like from what you showed earlier is your placement tool for the Cheerio items.
Yeah. So the tasty holes, because we knew we were going to build them in runs, probably not as many as you see here, probably more like 5 in a run. I built. Not only did I build the individual component itself for the tasty hole, which is massive in the scene when you drop it in there, but I built this run blueprint as well that allows you to really quickly place them in your scene. And we know that these scenes are going to, because it's kind of a platformer, so it's going to be very vertically oriented. And placing pickups by hand is going to be very tedious. So I wanted to build something really quick that could do this. And you'll see that if I move it up and down, it doesn't move anything. It doesn't go anywhere, and that's because in the construction event for this particular blueprint, it's actually raycasting down into the scene and then placing the item just slightly above the ground.
Awesome.
So that's pretty cool. Yeah, so that's it. That's me.
So on my end, I've been working on textures for the raccoon character. This is very much work in progress. I need maybe a few more hours to finish it up. But we also have the proxy model that I'm gonna rig and give it to Tom to start prototyping some of the more advanced locomotion mechanics and make sure that stuff like double jump and sprint works the way it needs to.
Yeah, because our character is going to be like half the height of the mannequin, and so a lot of the numerical values are going to change just based on the size of that character.
Yeah, and like in production, a lot of times you need animated mesh before the art is complete. So that's what they refer as a proxy mesh, something that's going to be replaced in the end. I've already created a low poly mesh that I'm texturing right now, so it's just going to be the matter of me rigging what I have and passing it to Tom. This entire process is going to be recorded and released for all the patrons, so you guys can see the workflow for bringing a character into Unreal. I'm not a rigger by any means, but I've done this multiple times and I know what buttons to press to get it into the engine quickly and avoid the artifacts as much as possible. So this is our plan for the upcoming week or next few weeks.
2 weeks, yeah.
And I hope you guys are as excited as we are.
I'm really excited. I don't know about you. You're not really good with your feelings, so
I don't have feelings. Not feelings here.
Yeah, and I'm going to be recording some really quick video walkthroughs for the pickups and how I built the subclass system and the delegate stuff that I did with that.
Awesome.
As well. Yep, it's on my list.
I hope you guys had a great time and learned a few things from our first podcast, and we will see you in the next one or on one of our live streams.
Yeah, which should be soon. I don't think we have a date for the next live stream.
No, not yet, but that's going to be soon.
And next week's Christmas. But next week's Christmas, so it's going to be.
Yeah,
this can be tough.
Christmas is tough.
Okay, probably second week of January, if I had to guess.
Thanks for your time, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thanks. Oh, I forgot the thumbs up.